My guest today is John Walker, the CFO of an organization called Echoing Green. John, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, for those who don't know, just tell us what Echoing Green does.
Echoing Green is originally a foundation from General Atlantic Partners, the private equity firm. They grant make to social entrepreneurs. We've been doing that for about 25 years now. They pick them through a fellowship program, but basically we're focused on the entrepreneur themselves. We're looking for people who have the potential to create the maximum social change.
So if I'm a social entrepreneur watching this show and I want to apply to Echoing Green, what are the sort of things you're looking for?
For us, it is largely down to the individual. I know I'm going to keep saying that because it really is about that single individual person. Or we have partnerships as well, but it's really about the people. So the business plan obviously plays into it, but in a way, the business plan is really just a description of what that individual's vision is.
Are you looking for people who you know can raise capital down the road when they've gotten traction?
Yes, without question. And I think regardless of whether it's a non-profit, a for-profit, or a hybrid model, the next step that the entrepreneur has to go on to do is to raise the next round of capital. And so those people have to be able to communicate their vision, they have to communicate it succinctly enough so they can capture the next funder's interest and cash eventually.
And what is the size of a typical investment you guys make? How long does it last? What can people expect?
So we have a single stipend. It varies a little bit, but it's around about 90K. Over 2 years. So it's one of those sort of friend and family sort of early round type things. But what Echoing Green really tries to do is bring the entrepreneurs together into somewhat analogous to a business school class. You're really trying to bring that group together, get them all integrated, and that support network generally leads through to the other alumni classes as well, where they can draw on the other experiences that those guys have had, all the funding opportunities, all the access to capital that those people have managed to achieve.
What kind of organizations are out there for people who are looking for funding for their social entrepreneurship ventures?
Great question. I think that you've got one of the very obvious ones is business plan competitions. I think we see a lot of the fellows that come through, they're the very popular ones. They've had strong successes through business plan competitions. And then you've got the fellowship programs like Echoing Green, you've got the Skoll Foundation, you've got Ashoka, people like that really pick entrepreneurs again, and there's like grant funding that goes towards them.
This field of investing in social ventures sounds like it's in its infancy.
Yeah.
What kind of new structures are you seeing?
We created our own model last year, which would be called the recoverable grant. So we changed the grant towards this very long-term convertible note. So we're enabling our own access to capital based upon the success of the fellow way further downstream, but we're not adjusting too much. I think the more that you hamstring the entrepreneur at an early stage, the more it's difficult for them to raise capital in the next round. And we don't want to, Echoing Green does not want to impact that.
So taking convertible notes, looking for a return presumes that these companies have to have a viable business model?
Yeah.
How does that work?
One of the really interesting developments in the last few years is the concept for entrepreneurs to start out with a non-profit and actually looking at gaining access to resources. Capital is always a problem. Any entrepreneur that comes along, the first thing they think of is trying to raise money. But if with a social venture, one of the added advantages you've got is to think about starting up a non-profit, using that sort of entity to get access to resources that might be sort of lower cost than you would have in a normal organization, and then using that to develop and improve the business model. And once you've done that, then you move on to thinking about how can we access scaling capital. So you can then create this for-profit and capitalize that with more traditional finance.
What should these entrepreneurs look out for? What are the mistakes that you see often being made?
The entrepreneurs in the space need to really focus on is having a pitching capability and skill that is really about raising the capital effectively and efficiently. I think a lot of these people have great ideas and there's a social change, but in terms of communicating a clear business model and an economic sort of underlying fundamentals to the business model, the communication aspect and succinct pitches is something that I actually work on with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we support as well.
What kind of new structures are you seeing emerge in this space?
So one of the really key ones that we're seeing is this we're calling hybrid models. The attachment or the integration of a non-profit entity and a for-profit entity, delivering the same sort of organizational focus, the organizational mission. And the really key thing there is that a non-profit can access tax-exempt capital, can access a whole bunch of resources that other for-profit ventures, by dint of them being for-profit, can't get access to. But that entity focuses on the social change mission component of it. And then the for-profit side is one of scaling and capitalization towards scale.
What if you're a social entrepreneur, you've exhausted every angle, you can't raise grants, you can't raise capital, what other options do you have?
What you've got to look at is partnership opportunities. And we have one fantastic organization in our portfolio, Echoing Green, right now, a company called Hot Bread Kitchen, which is a non-profit based here in New York City. And she was remarkably successful at raising a good portion of foundation grants to start with. But in order to build that business model out, she needed significant capital to build a baking infrastructure. And that's not something that you can see an awful lot of capital opportunities for. So what was instrumental in her recent growth was a partnership with New York City Economic Development Corporation, where they funded an entire base up in Harlem to provide her with a baking mechanism, but also do a kitchen incubator program as well. And so that really took the issue of capital for her off the table.
So the sale of bread actually funds the important work she's doing with the
Exactly.
female entrepreneurs?
Profits that come from the bread go towards English language training and workforce development skills for low-income immigrant women in the marketplace.
So what's next for Echoing Green?
Well, I think this is a particularly exciting year. We've got our next finalist weekend coming up in May, which is really our big bash to bring all the potential finalists together and make that next fellowship selection. So that's always a particularly exciting time for Echoing Green. And I think this whole sector, this impact investing sector, is really gaining momentum so quickly. So we've got a lot of new programmatic ideas that we're bringing to fruition right now that I expect to be released over the course of this year. So it's a particularly exciting time.
John, this is terrific. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you.